everybody, and welcome to today's tutorial on DaVinci Resolve 14. So when you first open up DaVinci Resolve, you'll get a screen similar to this. This tutorial is really for anybody that's not used DaVinci Resolve 14 before, or if you've used it before but you're struggling with the layout and how to get into it, or if you're used to using an editing software such as Premiere Pro and you're wanting to just kind of expand what you know about this software to see how it can benefit you. So initially, this is the first area that you will be displayed, and the more projects you've got that you've worked on will all appear in here. Now, I've just created some copies just for today's purposes, just so you can see how this looks. Now, if you're wanting to work on a project, you just click it, double click it, or hit new, open, and that's how you get started or continue working on a project. However, for today's purposes, we're going to create an untitled project. So Resolve 14 opens up straight into the editing window, which at the bottom here is marked with Edit. There are 5 different workspaces in Resolve. Resolve is renowned for having a fantastic colour grading feature, and that's at the bottom here. And there's also the media area as well. So we're going to start off in the media area. This is an area which I got used to using quite a lot in previous versions of Resolve, so in Resolve 12, Resolve 12.5. Resolve would initially open up in media. Now, the media window that you can see here is really just useful for initially starting your project, importing footage, and getting used to using it in that respect. So I'll go through everything that's relative, or everything that you can sort of use in this area, just so that you understand what's going on. So essentially, you should be shown something similar to this. On the left-hand side, you've got your databases, which is where Resolve accesses to either where your footage is or to where your projects are saved. Now, in this case, if I click on this section here and this section, you'll just see how this is working in these different areas. Now, if you have a specific location and you can't find it on the left-hand side, if you just right-click this area and hit Add New Location, you can essentially add a folder which points straight to your work, and Resolve will use that. So as you can see here now, I've got some footage to work with. Now, because these files are in the media pool, we do need to import them, but before we do so, I'm going to create some bins, and I would definitely recommend you creating some bins because it's a really easy place to start working with them before you start cutting and clipping your projects. Now, you can just drag these clips into the media pool, but what I suggest doing is just a bit of housekeeping to begin with. So I'm going to create one bin called Footage, another bin called Sequences, and I'm just going to keep it to these 2 initially. You might want to create another couple of bins, one for music, one for titles, and things like that. So with footage selected, I'm just going to grab these 4 clips and drag them into my footage bin. Now, I'm working with Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera footage, so it syncs quite well and works very well with Resolve, and that's the footage that I'm going to be using today. So from here, to create a sequence, you'll notice if I go back to Edit, the footage is now showing up in here, and I can create a sequence, I believe, if I just drag the footage down straight here. You'll notice I've got a new timeline that's been selected. However, for the sake of today's tutorial, I'm just going to nip back to here, and I'm going to show you another way of doing it. So back in my media pool space, I'm going to right click one of the clips and create a new timeline using selected clips, and this, I'm going to call it a rough cut. I like to have 4 video tracks and 3 audio tracks, and I'm going to hit create. One thing, in fact, I'm just going to delete this a second, I've realised. One thing that I do enjoy about Resolve is that you can set your timeline to 000, which, just created a new multicam, bear with me 2 seconds, which does make life a little bit easier. You can do this in, obviously, Premiere Pro, but it is a bit more difficult. So I'm just going to do this one more time. So from here, I'm now going to drag this sequence into my sequences bin, just so that I'm keeping everything nice and tidy. And now we can double click this and it brings us to the editor. So in the editing preview window here, we've got a few different options. A lot of these windows can be turned on and turned off. If you click on over the left hand side here, we've got our, double click this to bring up our source monitor. Very similar to Premiere Pro and other NLEs, you've got your bins up in the top left corner and the contents of those bins appearing here. You can turn this off by clicking on this button here, and you can also turn off your media pool, which just scales up your source monitor essentially. So that's quite handy. You can turn these on and off. The one thing that annoys a lot of people, first time users of Resolve, is that it's not as flexible as some other editors where you can undock your panels and things like that, but it does allow you to collapse panels, just giving you a bit more space to work with. So yeah, you've got your bins appearing here, your footage appearing here, and you can change how your footage looks by clicking on these options. You can also select if your footage is all out of sync and they're named in name order, so you can look through them. You can change how they are sorted there by clicking on the file name. You can also increase and decrease the thumbnails, which is quite handy. You've got a shortcut to the effects library, which you can see here, and you've got a shortcut to the edit index. So going back to the media pool, I'm going to now move over to the right hand side. We've got our timeline that takes the full section of the bottom. Some areas that you might want to make sure are checked on are these two options here, so the snapping, the magnetic tool which snaps your clips together, and the linking tool which makes sure that your audio and your video are going to be synced while you're moving things around on your timeline. And then on the right hand side here we have our viewer, our timeline viewer, which when we get some content appearing in here, will show that content up here. You've also got shortcuts to the audio mixers, metadata, and the inspector, which we'll come back onto a little bit later on. So I'm just going to quickly show you how to create a sequence, a really quick timeline, and then you'll have time to create something yourself, and there might be a bit of a time skip, but for now we're not going to look at any of these features in the timeline up here. We'll cover those in probably future tutorials. So I'm going to double click one of my source clips. A nice feature in Resolve 14 is that you can skim through the clips just like in Premiere Pro, but it also immediately brings them up into the source monitor. But if you double click a clip, it doesn't matter which one you're flicking through, it'll always revert to that clip that's selected and highlighted in orange. So just like in Premiere Pro, we're going to mark an endpoint where we want the camera to start, or where we want this to start on the timeline. So in this case, I'm going to mark an endpoint here, and I'm going to mark my out point around here. Now if I drag the clip from the middle, it'll drag both audio and video. If I drag it from the video timeline, it brings in video only, and similarly audio, it brings in audio only. So just as many options as other editing programs. Now earlier on we made sure that link was correct and selected. If you turn this off, you'll notice that you can select individually the audio and the video. So if you do want to just have video only, that's where you can click that position and you can see what's going on. Now, as you would have seen at the beginning of this video, we are going to create, or I'm going to create with you, a really quick montage sequence scanning through this location, and then we're going to do a quick color grade so you can see how the color grading reacts. But the rest of the editing would carry on very similarly to what we've just seen there, where we can create our in and out points and keep adding to our timeline. Now, I do want to show you a couple more things while we're here. Some nice features in Resolve. On the right hand side, you've got this little icon which looks like the timeline, and if you turn this to this button here, or this button, you can see how that adjusts. I'm going to select this one. You can actually adjust the height all the way through here, and some really cool features in Resolve 14. If you want to do a fade in or a fade out, you can grab these handles in the top corners, and what they do is fade the video in and out as such. And then if we stack these on top of each other like so, you have a fade in to one another. Now, as you can see here, there's a bit of a glitch happening, and I'll just talk you through why that's happening. Now, in Resolve 14, the way that Resolve renders is different to Premiere Pro. You can't hit enter to render a sequence out. Essentially, Resolve tries to render in real time, so if you keep pressing space and watching through it, it should eventually start flicking through and playing correctly. What it's doing is rendering at the same time that it's being processed. Now, if you want clips to render while you're continuing to edit, there's a couple of ways you can do this, or there's one main way of doing that, and that's by going up to playback and just making sure that render cache is set to smart. And what that will do is, similar to Premiere Pro, as you've just seen this icon here, it will change it from red to blue, so that when you're playing it through, you know that that's rendered. Now, if at any stage your cache gets full, you would have to empty that, and it will send all of the clips that have rendered, and I'll show you as an example, it will send them to back to red, as you can see here. And as soon as you replay it through, that goes back to blue. So there's a few different ways of doing things, similar and at the same time different to other NLEs. That's just one way of fading in and out. You've also got your effects transitions up here in your library, and again you can click on these and add them much like you can with any other software. Just quickly revisiting the inspector element, this tool is effectively similar to the effect controls which you would see in Premiere Pro. So by clicking on this sequence, we can now see it's got our transform options, which allows you to change the position if you want picture in picture, check the zoom, and also allows you to do some cropping, some dynamic zooming, lens correction, and so on and so forth. So effectively, I'm going to leave it now, quickly jump forward a few steps till we get to the next section where we'll look at colour grading. I've just skipped forwards a little bit in my rough cut, so we have a sequence which now looks similar to the video which you saw earlier on. In this one we now have some fade-ins, fade-outs, and it brings us into the scene such as this. So once we've reached this section, I'm just going to nip back to media and show you what I've been doing here. So I've created a couple of more bins. If we go to sequences, I'll show you we're currently in the rough cut, and you'll notice I also have title and colour grade. So while in this time skip I have created a quick title to initially begin with, and then once I've completed the title I've created a quick colour grade. So jumping over to the title sequence, I've just created a really basic title. Resolve, in all honesty, hasn't got the best titles to work with. However, to create a title, it's very similar. It's not very similar to After Effects or Premiere Pro, but it's not very difficult. We essentially go onto Effects Library, and you have an option for titles, and you have some presets. And within those presets, in the inspector element, you get some options. You've got some good options to fade in, fade out, and also to animate boxes and things like that. Overall, though, I found the timeline for titling quite limiting, so it's not something I would potentially use. So I'm not going to cover titles. If you would like me to do a title tutorial, feel free to leave me a comment. But as you can see here, it's fairly simple. You've got your options here. You've also got second options and more. There's not much you can do with it. So going back to our media pool, we're going to move on to the colour grade. So once you have created your timeline and you're happy with it, let me just go back to our media. Now, the reason why I create duplicates essentially is from how I used to work in the past. If you did a colour grade in previous versions, not of just Resolve and any editor, I've just got into the habit of creating duplicates, so that if something goes wrong on one timeline, I always have a backup timeline which hasn't deleted everything. There's always one version before it. So if you're like me and you want to just create duplicates, the quick way of doing that in Resolve is to right click, and there'll be an option to duplicate your timeline by going up to timelines and duplicate timeline. And what that does is it creates a copy. What I usually do then is retitle it to whatever it is I'm working on. So usually I'd have a rough cut, a title, colour grade, audio correction, and then a master. And that's just how I like to work. So you can mimic that if you like, or if not, feel free not to. Okay, so once we've got our clips, you can then go over to the color grade navigator. Now, I am going to go through a few things. I've set this up already, but I'll talk you through how I got this grade. This color grade might not be for everyone's taste. What I was going for was quite a oversaturated Instagram look for the shot, so it looks similar to this. So it has the warm sort of overlay over the top of it, and everything is very oversaturated. Now, I wanted to go through a few things, and at the top, essentially, I'm going to cover most of the features that you can see here and talk about each one. Color grading is quite a long process, and it'll take a little bit of time to get your head round, but I'll show you the quick ways that I go about it. So the way Resolve operates with color grading is through a nodes basis. So nodes are these things that you can see at the top here. So this is you'll have something that's similar to this with just one clip, and then this will output to this end here, and your clip will look something like this. If you've captured it in flat, there'll be no post-processing on there whatsoever. So I'm just going to talk you through how to get a similar look to this, and the steps that you can take, and you can also see how each step differs slightly as well, and what you can do with it. So okay, so to start with, you have your first node. What I always like to do on this first node is right click it and create, go to add and add serial. What this does is it creates a duplicate node to the one that you're already working with, and that's so that you can kickstart getting working. As you can see here, there's some correction happened here, but there's no correction here. Now each node that you add will have no excess grading to it, so you're not duplicating this node, you're creating a completely separate node. So as you can see here, this one has a bit of some effect added to it, this one doesn't, this one does, this one has 3, this one has 2, and this one has 2. So you can get an idea of what's going on with these little icons. So I'm going to just go back to here. Now to go back, all I was doing was Control-Zing to go back to here. Now on my first, so imagine this node has nothing on it at this point. My first node, I always like to do an autocorrect. Resolve is such a powerful color grader that autocorrect can usually autocorrect does the things that I would normally go and do first, which is boost contrast as I'm working with a flat color profile. Flat color profiles notoriously have very uncontrasty sections to them because they are trying to be as flat as possible. So by going to color and auto color on my first node, that's what creates this initial thing. And just to show you the difference, that's flat, that's with an autocorrect. Now other tutorials online will show you to create, will tell you to use LUTs. Now LUTs stand for lookup tables. And a lookup table, essentially, if I show you this one here, well, I'll show you what a lookup table is by doing it. So firstly, let's create a lookup table. So I'm going to go to add node, add serial. Now, with your new node, you can right click this, go to 3D LUT, now lookup table, 3D lookup table. You can go down to your camera manufacturer and you can select Blackmagic Cinema Camera Film to Rec 709 or 709 version 2. Now Rec 709 is a colour profile which essentially does this, and it uses the colour data which is associated with Blackmagic and creates a colour grade which makes it as close to 709 as possible, and that's what this does for you. Now a lot of the time people are quite happy with that, so they apply a LUT and from there they're okay, they're good to go. However, I find that with the lookup table, it does things which I'm not particularly happy about, such as it overexposes some of the areas that we're losing a little bit of detail on some of these areas, and I find that doing your own colour grade is far more beneficial than applying a LUT. And a lot of the time, if you adding your own colour grade onto things, you can start to be a little bit more selective. So for example, with this node here, so the first colour grade I performed on this, as you can see, I've not lost any of the details in the highlights, and we've got just as much colour as the 3D LUT that you can see here. But I haven't lost that area. Now, looking at here, it's telling me exactly what I've altered. Now, what you can see down here is the curves, the curve form. Now, a lot of the time, a curves edit, a lot of people go straight for the S, and they create an S, and that will sharpen and take out some of the highlights and the shadows. I don't like to do that, however. In this case, what I've done is reduce the greens and reduce the reds, so potentially I had a little bit too much red coming through, and that could be because of this lens flare that I have coming across the scene, and also the red from the tiles on the top of the roof. Something else I've added to this colour curve. Many apologies, I had the wrong one, I had the wrong node clicked. In this case, what I have done is created a little bit of an S curve. I've also got my colour wheels doing something, so let's go over to our colour wheels. I've reduced the highlights to -15, and I've increased the shadows to 0.28, and I've left midtones, and offset should already be at that as standard. You can see here that I've increased the saturation to 85.9. And if you press on number 2 down here, I've colour boosted to 35. So you can see what those things do if I sort of increase these here. So some would argue that that's a little bit too oversaturated, so I can scale that down slightly just here. In the next colour grade, this is where I've put on the orange haze. Now, a lot of the time, as you can see here, I think what I'll do is a colour grading tutorial, so you can see this all in action. But essentially in this one, I've adjusted the curves, and I've also offset my primary. So it's actually, if you hover the mouse over the top, you can see that now: primary balance, primary offset, and custom curves. So this time I've dropped the curve in the center, and what that does is it just reduces the overall contrast of the center of the image. I've then increased the offset here up to the orange section, and that gives it the overall orange look. And all these other options have been left. I haven't color boosted it, and I've left saturation at 50. Coming back over here, these all look okay. So effectively I've only altered the offset. I've increased the lift slightly, and I've decreased the gamma, and I've increased the gain slightly as well. You'll also notice that the colour wheels symbol is the same up here, so we're currently working in the colour wheels. Over here we've also got this section, but we can see here I haven't touched any of that. So I've just worked in the colour wheels in these two areas. So these match up with these. -3, 4, 1 and 29. So turning on my final LUT, you can see just a slight difference, and on this final LUT I've just decreased the green and red just to pull it back a little bit, and I've adjusted these two slightly, and my colour wheels have been kept the same. So I've just used the colour curves and my colour wheels here, my primaries bars. So once you're happy with the grade that you have, and in this case I was quite happy with this, as you scroll through your footage, you'll have the problem as all of the LUTs that you applied on the previous one will not be there for the second one. So for the second one, again, you'll just have this one LUT, which will be looking like so. So for this bit here, I'm just going to show you a quick trick. Now, if you've got one LUT like this, and let's reset this node so it's back to 0. Now, say for example, if you've got scenes which are very similar, you can get away with duplicating the nodes that you've done for the previous scene, and you can duplicate them to the one that you're working with. Now, the quickest way to do that is to select the node that you want to work with, so this one, right click the timeline on the right click the clip which has the color grade, and select apply grade, and instantly you can see it's applied the exact same color grade to this one here, and so now both of these match. And as we go through, you can see how I've done that for all of them, apart from this last one, which I've tweaked slightly because it's an inside location. So some of them you won't be able to naturally create. And that's it for colour grading. Effectively, you want to be just going through it like that. There aren't really any tricks to colour grading. It is just a case of knowing and understanding what it is that you want to produce. Every time I colour grade this differently, I try to look for a different way of doing it. I went for the orange look, the Instagram filter look for this. You can also look at, colour grading with the orange and teal look and things like that. So once you're happy with your colour grade and you're happy with the rest of the footage, you can go back to your editing preview mode and you can look through it. And if you're ready for delivery, you can next go over to deliver. Now, I haven't added any audio to this timeline, so this isn't obviously a finished timeline, but audio editing is much the same as the video editing. We're not going to get into Fairlight this week, but we are going to look at deliver. So once you're happy with your timeline, you go over to deliver. You've got some really quick presets that you can use. You can use a custom preset, which you can set the parameters for here. You can also make sure that you're selecting an area such as, so in this case in videos, I'm going to click OK and we can rename it. We'll rename it later on. We're going to save the format to QuickTime. You've got all these other options. Codec H.264. Make sure your resolution's correct, your frame rate's correct, and all of these areas are fine. So once you're ready, you can go down to File, and this is where you can change its name to Shoot or something like that, and that will then have altered the top file name. So from this, you can then click Add to Render Queue. I'm just going to delete that first one. And then once you're ready, you can select Start Render. Once you've clicked Start Render, this will then start rendering this whole sequence out. The reason mine's giving me an error is due to the fact that I'm also streaming this so that I can create the tutorial. So that is Resolve in a nutshell. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. It was a real crash course and a little bit of colour grading, but ultimately how to use the workspace. Future tutorials will cover these areas in a bit more depth. Hopefully you found this useful, and I'll see you at the next video.